can talk about the neurobiology of trauma and the impact of trauma on the body and the brain, but I want to do it in a way that is acknowledging that, that's not shaming survivors for the trauma symptoms that they do have or the coping strategies that they've had to rely on to keep them safe. It's from this deep understanding of seeing people and knowing that the journey is not linear. And if you're reading something that's activating, that we can affirm that and acknowledge that this is not easy and that we can be really passionate about this work and want to help others and simultaneously recognize our own boundaries within that and to take really good care of ourselves.
Welcome back to season 2 of the How We Can Heal podcast. I so enjoyed sharing season 1 with you, and we have some incredible guests coming on for season 2. I created this podcast because the hard times seem to just keep on coming these days. These guests and I have committed our lives to healing work and to fostering health and joy in the world, even as we work through the impacts of trauma and face deep challenges. So let's dive in and let's all keep talking about how we can heal. Today, our guest is Zabie Yamasaki. Zabie is the founder of Transcending Sexual Trauma through Yoga, an organization that offers trauma-informed yoga to survivors, consultation for universities, and training for healing professionals. Zabie has trained thousands of yoga instructors and mental health professionals, and her trauma-informed yoga curriculum is now being implemented at over 30 college campuses and trauma agencies, including the University of California, Stanford, Yale, and Johns Hopkins University. Zabie is a survivor, mother, partner, daughter, sister, friend, and activist. She's the author of the book and affirmation deck published by Norton, Trauma-Informed Yoga for Survivors of Sexual Assault, Practices for Healing and Teaching with Compassion. Her work has been highlighted on CNN, NBC, KTLA, and the Huffington Post. Zabie and I connected years ago as we were each independently creating training programs in the field of yoga and trauma. We've collaborated and supported one another from afar for about a decade now, and I'm thrilled to have her as a guest on the show. Welcome, Zabie. Zabie Yamasaki. I got the applause. Here they go. Yay! You're here. Oh, those go on. Yes, and on and on. I'm so happy to be able to have this conversation with you and to be able to share it in all the ways that we do over podcasting magical platforms. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's such an honor to be here with you and be in this community. I'm just so excited to connect with you all today.
Yes. And I want to start, as you know, with just your journey, your history, what brought you to yoga and trauma-informed yoga. But I was thinking about that and I was wondering, what was like your very first experience with yoga? Do you remember it?
Yes. Actually, my very first yoga class that I took, I was living in San Diego at the time. I was working as a career counselor at a homeless shelter. And I met two amazing folks, Gil and Tanya, and they had been going to Core Power Yoga for some time, and they were always bonding about it and talking about it at work. And, I was curious, but I'm like, no, I don't know about heated yoga. That just sounds like a lot. I don't, and it's so interesting because I think for many, many years, my experience with sexual violence and then my work and sort of my self-care tools and the work that I was doing in the world, it was very these compartmentalized aspects of my life. You know what I mean? I didn't see the interconnection between the mind, body, spirit until much later. So one day they're like, Zabie, just come with us. It's not a big deal. Just try. And I can't tell you, I stood in front of my mirror at home, pulling out different things to wear. I'm like, do I wear something comfy? Do I wear leggings? I mean, I'm telling you, I had no idea what to expect. And I just remember stepping onto that mat and everything kind of just melting away. There was something about the teacher just inviting us to show up as we are. And I think all of that armor that I had had up for so long, and I had experienced sexual assault a few years prior to that, to being in San Diego. And I wasn't quite, I wasn't quite making the connection yet between, wow, there is a practice out there that can support me with feeling grounded and supported in my own body, something that helps me move beyond trying to have the words to articulate what I'm feeling, something that allows me to slowly chip away at these layers of trauma, really, that I've put up for so long. And so it's hard for me to even find the words to describe it, but it was a pretty magical class. And, after that, I was hooked. And I found everywhere that I moved, I was finding local studios and finding ways to practice. But it's amazing how sometimes you can have just that one experience. And I mean, it really changed the trajectory of my life and my healing journey, and what I've gone on to create today. I love that question because I haven't actually thought of.
And it's funny 'cause as you're talking, I'm thinking about my first experience was at UCLA, which you spent a lot of time there on the campus. I don't know if Sunset Recreation Center still is like a little treehouse up in the woods. It's probably like grown a lot since then. But I took a class there, and Blossom, the actress, I'm forgetting her full name, but she was in the class, and it was so I felt very like I just moved from Northern California to LA. I felt very like, wow, I'm in LA. There's like a superstar in my yoga class. But she was super nice, and it was very mellow. It was like a hatha level 1 or intro or something. And I just remember walking back to the dorms, and like the moon was out, and I felt so peaceful, and I was like, whoa, there's something magical here. But never would have thought that we'd be here talking all things yoga for decades. But yeah, those first moments are like powerful portals, right, into a whole journey. So at what point then you're practicing, you're getting these like starting to chip away, as you said, at some of the armor, or recognize it's there even. And then when do you start teaching? What's that point look like?
I always knew that before I went into yoga teacher training, I was carrying my own lens as a survivor. I knew it was going to look different. I knew that I wanted to build upon this foundation that I was learning in my yoga teacher training and find my own unique, authentic teaching voice and apply it to the work that I was doing. So, professionally, a large portion of all of my professional work has entailed working on college campuses, working within the anti sexual violence field as a prevention educator, as a healer, doing basically every job you can imagine that exists within a sexual violence response center. And, as I was doing that work, basically every day I would be out in the field, whether that was in the community or on campus, giving presentations about sexual assault, talking about the impact of trauma, talking about the unique experience of sexual assault survivors. And every presentation I would facilitate, there would be a number of survivors who would come and disclose to me afterwards. And there were these themes that started to emerge. Survivors sharing that they needed something tangible to help them work through the physiological impact of trauma and triggers that they were navigating every single day, the flashbacks, the insomnia, the chronic pain, the GI issues, all of the ways we know that trauma somatically shows up in our bodies. And two, many of them shared that they just weren't quite ready to process talk therapy or process their experiences through talk therapy, or they hadn't quite found a modality that felt right for them. And as I was going, so, I'm going through yoga teacher training. I'm simultaneously doing my day job, working in the anti-sexual violence field. And I'm also always holding my own lived experience as a survivor and honoring the way that that shows up in the various spaces that I move through the world. And I started to see all of the, you can't see me, but this webbing, this interconnection of all of these experiences, that we just can't leave the body out of the equation when we're talking about healing from sexual trauma, when the body has been a place of such violation. And I think about how many survivors I worked with that were also trying to navigate the system. Oftentimes with folks who do not believe them, they're told, okay, you need to go and report to this person if you want to report the assault on campus. If you want to move through the criminal justice system, then here's who you contact. And here's a referral for a support group that's no longer running. So maybe check back about that. You're just getting a barrage of information. And
Like a case manager, like as if you just had this thing happen to you and now you become a case manager as well. Like,
exactly, the burden is so great that we place on survivors, and then to also not have the tools of embodiment or of knowing, wow, how can I be safely in my body right now? How can I really be attuned to what my nervous system is communicating to me about who I feel safe with and who I trust? There's so much. And so I knew through all of that I wanted to create a program that was specifically for survivors of sexual assault, that spoke to the language of the body, that provided an anchor, that provided resourcing, that was going to be a great complement to those who might be simultaneously in talk therapy or in group therapy or working through the system, or resources of support. And also, I found that many survivors would start with trauma informed yoga and then feel empowered to seek medical care or to seek out that appointment with a therapist, because they had gotten to a place within their body where they felt, wow, I'm worthy of additional support. I don't have to carry this alone. So it kind of just, it was, as I'm describing it to you, I feel just emotional thinking about just the journey that that I've been on, and how, when we do work from a place of our own deep lived experience, it becomes so personal, and you feel so connected to it, and you feel so attuned oftentimes to, when survivors are building programs for survivors. I think that's when some of the most powerful healings can happen.
and it is amazing to be a part of that. I think you and I both, work with mental health professionals and yoga teachers, and that sort of web. You were making like a web with your hands earlier, but it's like it does feel that way now. And did you ever feel like people around didn't quite get what you were doing, or like it was new or different, or it wasn't like I got a lot of the like yogas. I don't know if this is like a generational thing or sort of a different stigmas, because I think yoga has evolved over time in terms of what people expect it to be. But I would get a lot of the like, oh, that's kind of hippy dippy, or that's airy fairy, or, and I do think that has changed. And now there's other expectations of what it is. But did you ever meet that in your journey?
Oh, absolutely. And I had to work really hard to carve out this path for myself, because I think, also as a woman of color working primarily within higher education institutions, and then also making sure that people weren't culturally appropriating the practice as a South Asian woman, there were so many things that I was tethered to, and wanting to do the work with integrity and also make it accessible, and also talk about the research and the benefits. I found myself, anytime I was going into a staff meeting or anytime I was going into a space where folks were inviting me to talk about the impact of trauma informed yoga on the healing process for survivors, I'd find that I would over prepare and have all the research and all the numbers when, our ancestors knew for centuries that yoga was a healing modality, that started in India as a means to transcend people's suffering. But then I found that I was trying to show up in all of these academic spaces and speak their language. So yes, I definitely was met with resistance. And, I always felt like I had to be on my A game. And I'll never forget, when I was still working for University of California, we had President Napolitano's task force to end sexual violence across each of the UC campuses. And we had a task force meeting, and they asked me, they're like, you have 10 minutes on the agenda to talk about why trauma informed yoga should be implemented as a healing modality in each of the sexual assault response offices on every UC campus. 10 minutes. And the room was filled with, it was chiefs of police at every UC campus, Title IX directors, care directors, survivors, student activists. So, also holding this lens of, wow, there are multiple audiences that I'm trying to speak to. So if I have 10 minutes, what was the most powerful thing that I can talk about? And, I ended up kind of starting with just this awareness around the physiological impact of trauma on the body and how we have to create multiple pathways for survivors to heal, because as we all know, not every survivor is going to heal in the same way. And it ended up going well, and it's now implemented at every UC campus. But I mean, it's so amazing speaking with you about this, because I don't think I take time often to reflect on just how much has gone into building the work that you and I do in the world. I think sometimes people think, oh, you teach yoga and I don't think people recognize how much goes into integrating this practice into non-traditional spaces.
It's a lot, and I think it is, like, a very lived experience infused passion too, right? I mean, I know for myself, it was, like, studying all this stuff and then recognizing that yoga was the thing that was the most healing for me when I needed it the most, right? It's like, why was it that, and why wasn't it these other things that we do have at that point in time, like, late 90s, early 2000s, like, we didn't really have we definitely didn't have the level of research we have now about yoga, but I don't think, like, trauma informed yoga, I had never heard that, like, I didn't understand, but I understood. Like my body was going, yes, keep doing this, keep showing up. And I was moving through things, and I was so curious of, like, I have to be able to describe this to other people, because I'm in all these academic circles and other places where I'm not getting something that I am getting over here. And so if I really want to be, in the world of individual or social or collective healing, like, I have to use this experience. Like, there's no way I would be leaving part of myself to the side, which thankfully yoga helps us to not do. I would be leaving this really important jewel out, and that would just feel completely out of integrity. So I think that, I think you and I share some of that, where when we have the personal experience, and then for me, it was after really getting the words for it and being able to communicate it. I also see a lot of people who feel like, I know this is helpful, but I can't explain it. Like, if you asked me to sit down and say in 10 minutes to that board, I wouldn't know where to start. Like, there's, it's in there, but it's not quite communicable yet. And I feel like that's where, like, learning all the ways, and I feel like I'm constantly learning new ways, right? Like, even recently I was listening to a neuroscience podcast, and they talked about how when you're learning, at the end of your learning state, like, if you sit and close your eyes for, I forget the amount of time, like 3 minutes or something, your hippocampus plays backwards everything you just learned and like kind of downloads it into your brain so you can really take in the learning. And I'm like, hello, Shavasana. Like, like these things that just close your eyes at the end of a learning session. And I'm like, okay. So there's just constantly more coming through. But there was something that stood out to me as you were describing, these dynamics in academic settings too, which is a lot of people, this is starting to change, but a lot of people don't learn about trauma in their academic programs or in their even internships. And so like starting to change for sure, and trauma informed care and trauma informed work is much more common. But where did you learn about trauma? Was it in a master's program? Was it in your training at work? Did you have to seek it out on your own? Did you learn about it from your own experience, the people in front of you? Probably all the above, but where did it come from at first?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, it's really hard to pinpoint one specific thing because it definitely, my master's is in higher education administration and student affairs. And so, of course, I didn't have any courses on trauma, unfortunately, in grad school. And beyond that, there's obviously something so powerful about survivors creating programs because, again, there's so much innate wisdom that's there. We have a language to describe things that are not from that white male researcher voice, which a lot of the books, unfortunately, in the trauma field, um, don't provide almost like that soulful, intersectional, affirming, compassionate, tender lens of looking at trauma. I think when I wrote my book, that was something that was really important to me, to write the book from a lens of many of the folks reading this book may be mental health professionals, maybe yoga teachers. They also may be survivors, and that may have brought them into doing this work, which brought them to picking up this book to learn more. And so, how can I write this book from a lens of holding people who are doing all of the holding? And is really, really essential to the language that I use, the opportunities for pacing and taking breaks. If I wrote something, for example, about statistics or how common sexual violence is in the world, then I made sure to kind of bring it back to the breath. And as you were reading that, notice what might have come up for you. If you feel triggered in your body, I invite you to flip to the pages in the back of the book so you can do some of the practices. Just so many of the self study that I've done around trauma, all the books that I've read, the trainings that I've done, will forever be grateful for that psychoeducation around my own lived experience as a survivor and everything that I learned to integrate into my work. And also, I'm still learning, and you are such a great teacher for me. Lisa uses the term, the importance of taking a trauma fast. And I think when we do this work, when we live it, and when we do this work, and we're not only teaching to survivors, but we're holding space for others who are doing this work, we have to find ways to increase our margins and to create space and to not fill up our days with all of the things. Where our bodies are not meant to absorb this much trauma related material. And so yeah, I think I'm kind of in a roundabout way trying to answer your question, because I just try to offer a lot of softness and compassion into the way that I show up and do the work, and less from sort of I can talk about the neurobiology of trauma and the impact of trauma on the body and the brain, but I want to do it in a way that is acknowledging that, you know, that's not shaming survivors for the trauma symptoms that they do have or the coping strategies that they've had to rely on to keep them safe. It's from this deep understanding of seeing people and knowing that the journey is not linear, and if you're reading something that's activating, that we can affirm that and acknowledge that this is not easy, and that we can be really passionate about this work and want to help others, and simultaneously recognize our own boundaries within that, and to take really good care of ourselves.
And to need a break from it sometimes, not only just in order to sustain it, but just for the sake of the break, right? Like, I feel like in sort of, I guess, American or probably beyond that at this point, but like working productivity culture, we sort of quantify rest because it allows you to keep going. And it's like, well, what about just for the sake of it, right? So I think those trauma fasts for me, I think of that's like when I'm going away for the weekend and I want to bring a book and I have 12 books that are about, work related stuff at this point, yoga, trauma, mindfulness, breathing, whatever. And I'm like, can someone give me like a real light romance novel or something that I can just get into and read through? And it's not like there's not going to be any trauma in it because there's trauma in almost everything, but it's not the point, right? Like maybe this is fantastical or maybe it's otherworldly or whatever it is. But I want to get into a narrative that so many narratives are based around coming up against essentially a trauma, a challenge, and moving through that. So I'll even like go look for a movie and have a really hard time finding something. It's like comedy or documentary that's, just about nature or something. Sometimes athleticism stuff, but even that people share their trauma story and why they're running so hard or they're doing their thing. And so it's like hard to find something, especially these days. I think we are collectively digesting a lot of trauma in so many ways. And so it's challenging to step away from it. We don't want to abandon it, but at the same time, it's important to live and not be pulled into, the word we would use, the trauma vortex, not be pulled into the trauma vortex, but to just like live your life. One thing that stands out to me as you're talking is how a big part of providing, I'll say, like, or holding space for trauma work is doing our own, and how there is still, in my opinion, a significant deficit in higher education in terms of how much people teach about trauma, and how there's also, in order to teach about it, you start learning and you go, oh, I recognize that, and that reminds me of my family, and that reminds me of what happened to me, and so there's almost this requisite of or this parallel process of doing our own work in order to learn about it. And I think about the sort of barriers to trauma informed work being in higher education. And I really think that's one of them because a lot of higher ed culture is, in my humble opinion, a recipe for burnout. Like it's really cranking out productivity and yeah, moving some important things forward, but sometimes at the at what cost, like sometimes at the cost of I have some dear friends who are professors in programs where I learned and beyond, and like it's too much. It's a lot. And so I think about how moving through and processing trauma requires space, right? Like even I can think about some of the early yoga classes I took at Sunset Rec, and you know, maybe 6 months, 3 months into my yoga practice, laying in Shavasana. And only then, after a few months of repeating this practice and creating more space for myself, going, oh, an emotion, like I didn't even realize that was there. Where did that come from? Oh, I think I know where that came from. Like it's a process to really own some of that stuff. And so there's the sort of, I don't know, political or evolutionary side of it, of like curricula evolving and people getting trained, but there's also this very personal element of providers, facilitators, teachers having the space, having a culture that supports them doing their own work for it to get there. I would love for every program like that involves humans or animals or life to involve some kind of trauma informed education, right? It's like, okay, maybe if you're Okay, even if you're on computers, like humans use computers. So there you go. Like, but I would love for it to be everywhere. But I do think it's a big ask in that way, right? To fully get it integrated and to not just have it be like a report, a literature review of which has its value and its place, but like you don't just want a trauma informed class to be a literature review of all the randomized control trials. Like that's not encompassing the fullness of the experience and the meaning.
I mean, there's so much that you said that was sparking something for me. And, I think back to my own journey as a daughter of immigrants. I haven't had a lot of models for rest in my life. My parents came here from India with such little. My dad went to pharmacy school in India, but when he came here, they moved to New York and he had to repeat everything all over again and went and ran into so many barriers and started off as doing deliveries at a pharmacy, even though he had the credentials of a pharmacist in India, had to go through school all over again. Luckily met the right people on their path. Dad opened up two of his own pharmacies and only just recently retired. He worked every single day, including Saturdays. Sundays, he was with us, but his mind was, oftentimes worrying about the pharmacy, and it's a high stress job. My mom gave so much. She was at every soccer game, every volleyball game, every softball game, showing up with the snacks, doing the accounting for my dad's pharmacy because she's an accountant. And, I grew up just in that high achieving mentality. Went to a great college, UC Irvine, did all the extracurriculars, filled all of my time. I think about what if we had this curriculum in college to help us learn how to rest, to help us learn embodiment, to help us identify the ways that trauma shows up collectively in the world and in our bodies, and how might that shape the way that we interact with one another? How might that shape the culture as you said, it is a recipe for burnout, both when you're a student and as a professional working, whether that's faculty, staff. I'm seeing it across the board. And then even in the pandemic too, just how many of my colleagues are just pushed to their very edge. Like, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? Why are we operating within a system that's not set up for us to thrive? And then I think about the work that you and I do and just how much magic is there, and how much even something that I love doing is training. My trainings are now open to anyone, to faculty within higher education institutions, to educators, to activists, and to see the ways in which they take these tools. They don't have to be a yoga teacher. They could start their session with the breath, with the sacred pause, with a moment to notice feet on the ground or hand on the heart and belly, and just the way that we can integrate that into spaces that are not predominantly set up in that way. I think about how many classes that I sat in undergrad in psychology classes, and something would be really triggering in class, and then I'm just sitting there taking notes and just like trying to muscle through it, when there were so many tools that I know now that maybe I could have used back then. So in many ways, I think it's exciting because the field is really evolving and is being integrated into these more non-traditional spaces. And I hope that that's the future for us, because if the pandemic revealed one thing, it's the way that we're operating is not sustainable, and we're going to continue to see the effects of that for years to come.
Yeah, and even within the pandemic, it's almost like there's I think for some people just having 100% access to work and being home, it's like it takes even more of those opportunities for social connection or rest in between away, I was thinking as you were talking about Becky Stewart, because she's been doing this. She's in Boston. I want to say she was at Simmons. I might not have this right, but I can put a link. But she's been doing this like in academic classes, bringing yoga in such a beautiful way. But I do feel, well, I hope that at a certain point, it's not like one person across the country, right? It's not like this different thing for students to come in and go, "Oh, wait, what? We're gonna take a few breaths. Oh, wait, what? We're gonna like have time to process something. Oh, we're gonna be encouraged to resource ourselves." Like I'm hoping that there's an evolution in that direction. We don't have to be like, "Wait, I know someone. I know 3 people who do this." Right? So, what are some of the tools you feel like I know at this point in your career, there are some things you have said on repeat, right? That you're like, let's go back to the basics and let's come back to this. So, what are some of the things that stand out for you that are like basic, great place to start, great place to come back to? Could be even something that's a part of your daily mindset and practice now.
Mm. Oh, gosh. I would say one of the most powerful somatic tools that I've been integrating lately is portioning, which is essentially taking stock of my energy. And I really encourage folks to do this on a daily, weekly basis. Just, maybe it's on Sunday. Maybe you're kind of reflecting on your week and doing a quick body scan of sort of energetically, emotionally, spiritually, physically, what have you experienced within the past week and how is that showing up for you? Are you feeling rested and full? Maybe you had a great weekend where you didn't do any work and you're feeling ready to tackle the week ahead? Maybe you had a really difficult week and you're feeling that exhaustion sort of still lingering in your body. And looking at your week, if you're noticing, wow, I have to give a 3-hour training on Monday, that means I'm going to schedule in a nap or a hike or time to sit in the sun or time for connection, right? Because we're all going to need different things at different times depending on what our nervous system says. And so, that's something I've been doing a lot lately. I used to try to keep up with those pre-pandemic standards of, oh yeah, I can do that 3-hour training and then hop on that podcast and then do that consultation and then teach that class. And now my capacity is just so much less. And so being really, really compassionate with myself of, you know what, I'm going to have to cancel that or I'm going to have to reschedule that. I'm honoring my capacity in the way that I can show up in that space. And I just don't have it in me this week. And I've just been really unapologetic about designing my days and my life with intention. And my son is 4, and we never know what kind of week. Every week it's like, oh, okay, there was a COVID exposure and so he's not going to be able to go to school this week, and how do we rearrange the schedule? It's just a different world. And I hope for all of us, there's this mantra that literally has and continues to get me through the pandemic from Dr. Susana Munoz. And she says, I'm not behind or unproductive. I'm doing as much as my mind and body are allowing me to do under perpetual stress and fatigue. And that's Dr. Susana Munoz. And it's just so every time I've memorized it now. Every time I recite it to myself, it's just a reminder that it's okay. You're doing your best. You're worthy of rest. You're worthy of flexibility and understanding and support. And we're not meant to do this alone. Just these really tender messages that I've spent most of my life ignoring and just powering through and let me do the thing, you know. Yeah.
It's that, I kind of resonated on a very different level, but my dad moved from New York to California and he had this like, I'm going to have to go back fear, and worked like 50 hours a week when we were kids. And there's that energy within your family, there's that energy within the culture that's just like go go go, work work work, get it done. Like there's like a fear underneath it. I don't know if this is true for you, but that's like how I feel around it. It's like this spinning on top of a fear that like something terrible is going to happen if you stop. And I think a lot about that. I mean, my dad was also in the Vietnam War and got shot in the arm, and trauma right there, and lost a bunch of his good friends. And it's like that energy, and we can I don't know how much time we have today, but like go into the whole origins of the United States and all the trauma that occurred on this land, and all the trauma and all that, whether it's from the victim or the offender, I'll just say, or exploiter. Like there's so much historical trauma, and this is where when we learn about trauma, it's everywhere. But I really feel like that energy that we live in the States and around the world, it's, you know, colonialism isn't limited to here. There's this impact of harm and exploitation and trauma, and then it's within our sometimes our own bloodlines, most of the time, somewhat in some way, in our own physiology, but also in the collective culture. And when I hear myself say that, this like spinning on top of a fear of what happens if I don't do this, like that's such a common response in the wake of like a very specific trauma, to feel like I can't stop or I'm going to feel the feelings. I can't stop or I'm going to be overwhelmed. I can't stop or I'm going to feel sad, or whatever the thing is. And so I feel like resting is so important. It's also sometimes really challenging. Like, I've led retreats where I'll just let people know, hey, I know you think it's going to just be like feet up by the pool, and I hope it is for you, but it might also be really hard to finally have some space to feel everything you feel. So just know that like there's not something wrong with you. Like this is a very normal process to finally stop and then feel all this stuff. And so the opposite of that spinning, right? Like that's where I really try to resource. Like, and I'm just thinking, this last weekend, Alex and I went out to Big Sur and camped. It was so nice. I had my phone off for like 24 hours. It was so nice. And I just lay on a table and stare up at the trees. And like that to me is like life well lived, right? Like I so enjoy it. I so love it. There's no productivity in there. And I was also reading this book, actually, I think you would really like. Have you read 4,000 Weeks? I think it's Oliver Berkman. Oh my, I think you would love it. It's exactly what we're talking about right now. I want to have him on the podcast because I just feel like he talks about it from a time perspective of like all these productivity hacks, and how we think we're going to eventually get ahead of everything and be on top of everything. And it's like you do all the things to try to do that, but then you're just spending your whole life doing that, right? Instead of saying like, nope, this is off. I'm laying on the table. I'm looking at the trees. Or just saying, nope, I have to cancel that. I don't have the energy. I don't have the bandwidth for that today. So I love what you're describing, and I love that mantra. Hopefully we can like pull it up and put it in the show notes and attribute it, because it's powerful to just there's self-compassion in that, there's patience in that, and there's the opposite of that spinning on top of this deep fear feeling, right? It's just like, it's okay. It's okay. We're gonna things are gonna still be things. We will keep living.
Absolutely. And just this deep knowing you're enough. Like you are truly enough. You could stop right now and you don't have to do anything. You're enough just for existing. It's so much of my work is helping to ground survivors in their own worthiness. And a lot of like the neuroplasticity, the post-traumatic growth, all of that comes from this deep embodied knowing of working to get to a place of knowing that you're enough, and that is so hard. I so resonate with everything you were saying about how challenging rest is and how difficult it is when you're so used to living in survival mode, and then to feel safety in your body can actually feel really scary and foreign, and to be really gentle with yourself in that process of learning to rest. I know, for example, I've done this work since 2006, and this was the first year that I did not book my entire April, because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and typically that's my busiest month where I'm speaking and training. And this year, I just told myself, I think about all the educators, the survivor advocates, folks in the field who feel like they need to do something every single day of April. And I'm like, you do the work all year long. You don't need to squeeze every ounce of yourself into every day of April. What are you trying to prove? Like, you are already enough. You're already doing the work. And so I had to practice what I preach, and really did so much less this April. And it felt so right. It, like, I was on a hike with my husband, and we took some photos. And usually at the beginning of April, I'm so stressed and thinking about preparing for all the things. And just that I could go on a hike with him at the beginning of April and have space on my calendar, that's how I'm wanting to show up, to do work that I love, and also live a life that I love, and create space for all parts of me.
Yeah. And I feel like that shift from the sort of spinning and the stress into just investing in like quality time and a life well lived is really huge for, providers, facilitators, teachers, leaders. It can feel like, I mean, I remember when I was working with commercial sexual exploitation, like nothing I ever do is going to be enough externally to bring this to an end. I was working in Oakland. It's like even if I just said within the city limits of Oakland, let alone the whole world, like I can't fix this. You know what I mean? And that's really hard to sort of connect with that as some level of truth. And I remember just feeling like I could live and die doing this work and it's still going to be a problem. And so within that, where and how do I find joy, and how do I find, how do I appreciate the impact I am having for the people I am working with within that context? And I think it's kind of like the worlds, you end up stepping into a world where you see a problem really clearly and from a close perspective. And, I know a lot of people like this. We want to be a part of the solution and we want to solve it. And I think being a part of the solution and having that weight to like putting it on your own shoulders to solve it are two very different things. And we can feel really good in our lives about being a part of the solution and contributing and sharing what we've learned and putting it out there and getting it out to people who can also use it and share it. But that's very different than that, like carrying the whole world or the whole even one problem on your shoulders. Cause that's, to me, that's a recipe for just, well, I guess burnout too, but also just like dissatisfaction, right? And it's like when you stop and look around at this world, it's bananas. Like we were just talking before we started recording about like every human being you see came from a mother and lived 9 months inside of someone's body. That's incredible. This tree didn't have any flowers last week and now it's blooming and there are bees. Like, I feel like any given moment I can look outside and just be kind of blown away by how magical and how crazy amazing it is just to be alive. And like that is something I value, right? Like those moments, if I haven't had that a moment like that all week, like, uh-oh, I'm going down.
Yes, the awe and the wonder. And, I love what you said, because, I think a lot about the framework of sustainable activism. And I recently read this book by Karen Waldron. It's called The Lightmaker's Manifesto.
Yes.
You read that book or heard about it?
I've seen it. I think I saw it in the bookstore and like paged
Yes,
through
it
it.
it is such a beautiful book. And it's actually, I felt like I was reading it at the perfect time, because I'm coming up upon my sabbatical is going to be starting in June. And she talks about, how often we think when we're working against, when we're trying to end sexual violence, when we're working within fields that are really heavy, that we oftentimes think that that's the only thing that can consume us, that the fight is never going to end. So we have to just keep going. But in order to do this work and show up in ways that are sustainable, she talks about how important connecting to our joy is. And that's exactly what we're just talking about, like the tracking and the awe and the wonder and just being connected to our humanity. And I actually just recently wrote my children's book. It's called Your Joy is Beautiful.
Nice. I love that.
But I had to mention it because it's exactly what we're saying of if we can kind of track those tiny moments of joy that we experience in the day. My son is a great teacher for me. He'll oftentimes close my laptop, grab my hand, take me over to his Legos or take me outside. And, those are some of my favorite moments because he reminds me what matters. And yes, my work matters. And yes, we do amazing. We make an amazing impact in the world. And, how are we coming back to the things that anchor us at the same time? So, yeah, the book is all about those ways that and for me, sometimes the tiny moments are like, oh wow, I'm having this sip of coffee alone before anyone is awake, and it almost feels like I'm the only person who is awake in the world right now and everything's okay. Just are getting a really good parking spot or just little tiny things. I think we lose sight of how those actually make a really big impact on our well-being.
When you talk about your son, I just, at this very desk where I'm standing right now, we have 2 dogs, Iris and Boomy will come in and he'll sit and he's huge. He's like 85 pounds. And he'll sit and he'll look up at me with his little innocent eyes. He's just a little over 1 right now. And then he does this thing. He just takes his paw and like when he wants you to pet him essentially, or he wants something, he just paws you like this. And it's so funny because I can be, like, all in something, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna be interrupted because I know it takes me so long to, like, get back from an interruption." And he'll come and he'll just boom, his paw on me. And I love it when, now even more, I can turn to him and just look in his little eyes, and I'm like, "Buddy boy, like, what do you want? What do you need? Let's go outside. I'll throw your little red toy that you love. I'll take a few deep breaths. Like, it's all good." It's so like I have a friend who I'd like to have on the podcast. She does somatic experiencing and astrology, and she has what do you call it? Like a not a guide dog, but a support dog that is trained to work with people with PTSD, and her dog will come in and like nudge her when she's starting to feel stressed or dysregulated in any way. And so sometimes I feel like that's what's happening. Like when we're just coming in, he's like, "Mama, I don't know what you got going on, but your energy is all kinds of funky. Like, let's go outside." Like, it's not as much for him, it's more for me. He's like, hey, stop that. It's beautiful outside. Go throw the red ball and you'll notice it, and then
Gosh,
you're
isn't
welcome."
that amazing? And how that resets your own energy in the way that you then can re-show up to what you were just doing. It reminds me, so I love this quote from Maya Angelou. It's your energy introduces you before you even speak.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, I think about that a lot. Just there's so many lessons in that. There's so many layers to unpack in that of, what does it mean to energetically show up into the various spaces that we hold and that we move through. And when my son closes my laptop and takes me outside, or it's such a reset for me, and then I can then show, I'm so much more full when I then have to hop back on Zoom, or and I'm holding a space. It's all interconnected. And I just that's my wish for folks, really, is to really deeply connect to those moments of ease, and have those be teachers, and just want more of that for all of us. We all need more ease.
It's really funny because I was gonna ask you, like, what tools that you've learned help you as a mom, and it's kind of the opposite, like, the kids coming in and regulating.
It really is.
know, it's like, well, I'm sure those tools come in handy too. The deep breath at the certain moment and the grounding when things are getting out of control and being able to hold it lightly. But yeah, that's beautiful. So I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about this, but what's your hope for the future of trauma informed yoga? How would you like to see the yoga world and the trauma informed yoga world evolve?
I love this question, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I feel like we're at this really exciting moment of really diverse authors who are writing books at the intersection of race and trauma informed yoga and healing. And, just this year alone, Dr. Gil Parker released her book on yoga for racial and ethnic based trauma. Octavia wrote a book, Pause, Rest, and Be. Tracy Stanley and Rest. Jacoby wrote A Queer Dharma. My book came out this year. Both Natita Gessel and Dr. Sheena Young are writing books on, basically intersectionality, trauma informed yoga, working with Black survivors of sexual trauma. I mean, it's just so amazing. I feel like we're at this time where these books are being integrated into yoga teacher trainings, and we're finally having conversations that from voices who have been left out of the mainstream dialogue for a long time. And so that is what my hope is just to continue to see this trend, to continue to see really diverse authors writing books on this topic and speaking in yoga teacher trainings. And really, to continue seeing this shift of, for so long, yoga teacher trainings have not included modules on trauma. And after the past couple of years, especially that we've had, I just that's no longer an option. That's like leaving prenatal modifications out of your training. Like it is essential. And so that's my hope, is that we're really continue to see this just becoming more widely integrated into these trainings.
100% agree. And yeah, it's a long journey, I think, in terms of yoga teacher trainings, really valuing and understanding and pulling that in. And I hope we are at the point where it's, essential. It's just like, where do you put your feet in triangle pose? Like, it's more important than where do you put your feet in triangle pose. Come on. You can put your feet anywhere in triangle pose. It's fine. It's fine. You'll be okay if your feet are a little this way or that. Like, yeah, it's recentering, right? Our values and the purpose and the really recentering the whole person healing opportunities that are there in a yoga practice, right?
Yes. And just creating spaces where people really feel seen and feel held. And even if you're not teaching specifically a class that you call trauma informed, the slight integrations that you're infusing into the way that you teach, into the language that you use, into your supportive presence, into your just nuanced understanding of how people might be showing up, and what a difference that's making in integrating those moments of compassion that we all need more of, because that ripple effect is so real, of the ways in which your teaching inspires the folks who are in the room and how they then go out and create those spaces for others. It really matters. It makes such a huge impact. And so it's really exciting to me. And it's been exciting too, just seeing this book get into the hands of folks who I didn't think would be reading it, like a non-traditional I mean, there are lawyers who are reading it. There's folks who I didn't think. I obviously want everybody to read this book, but you kind of write it from a lens of thinking who's going to pick it up, and just seeing how expansive the tools are have been really inspiring to me.
Yes, I love that. I used to teach a yoga class at a law firm, and I would like take a picture of like the yoga mats and the yoga blocks right next to all the thick case files, like Roman numeral case files, and then it's like yoga. It belongs everywhere.
I love that.
Something for everybody. So, a lot of people are still really struggling these days. I'm curious if you have any, we've kind of said a lot of things throughout our time today, but is there anything that comes to mind for those that are like really in the thick of coping with a loss or trauma? Like, what would you offer to them, to those people listening?
I would just say, the most important thing to remember is that healing is not linear, and to pace yourself and to offer yourself grace and compassion, and knowing that you are the expert of you, and you deserve to surround yourself with folks who support the health of your nervous system. I think, especially when we're talking about loss and trauma, sometimes it can really reveal the people who are our people and the people who are not, because I've fortunately experienced a lot of trauma and loss in my life. And I think, it's been so revealing that, people can show up for me when I'm shiny and publishing books and doing all the things and on CNN. But then when I'm in the depths of my despair and I need, just to be seen exactly as I am, and to not feel like I need to be fixed, and to just folks to honor me, to be able to sit with me in the darkness when I can't see the light myself. That those are special, special humans. So know that you're deserving of that kind of support, and you deserve to take as much time as you need to move through at your own pace.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. What gives you hope these days?
Oh gosh, definitely my son. He is my rainbow baby, and he's such a miracle. In so many ways, I think, he definitely carries his brother's spirit with him, and there are so many moments. Recently he will not go to sleep lately unless I lay with him. And we're in his little toddler bed, which is basically a crib that's been converted into a bed. So you can imagine it's very small. So I'm in there with him, and he puts his little hands on my face, and he's like, Mommy, you're so brave. You're so amazing. I
Oh.
love your hair. I love your eyes. I love your teeth. I love your fingers. Like, it's like his own little body scan with me.
Oh, I love
Our
that.
nightly ritual lately, and it's so innocent and precious and magical. And it gives me hope. I think parenting is its own form of activism. It, it's really, really, and there's many ways to parent in the world, and I think that it's just been special for me to affirm with him from a very young age that he is enough, that he is beautiful just as he is, and just wanting to anchor him in those messages at a really young age, and also not shield him from the world that we live in. Really parenting from a social justice lens it takes work, and it does. It gives me hope. Our future generations give me a lot of hope. And this children's book it's going to be published next year, and it's just super exciting to kind of, it's connected to my work, obviously, in some ways, but it's not the specific trauma lens. It's I think that's what happens with healing too, right? As we heal, so our work continues to evolve. And so it's just a really exciting passion project for me, and I can't wait to see it out in the world.
That's a trauma fast right there. I'm gonna order it to read for myself. Take it on vacation with me and just over and over and over. I mean, we need it, right? We need play, we need simple books with pictures, we need love, we need joy, we need rest, we need all the things. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time today to come on and to share all this with us. I feel like I know there's so many places we could go and so much so many other avenues we could cover. So perhaps we'll have you back on the show at some point and we'll go down another path. But for now, how can people connect with you if they want to keep in touch?
Well, it's been such an honor to do this with you, Lisa. Thank you. And you can connect with me at my website, which is zabieyamasaki.com. And on Instagram, it's Transcending Trauma with Yoga. And then on the website, you can see all the information about the book, which is Trauma Informed Yoga for Survivors of Sexual Assault, Practices for Healing and Teaching with Compassion, as well as the accompanying affirmation card deck. And if you're interested in training with me, there's information about my Trauma Informed Yoga teacher trainings and a new course that I released on reclaiming rest, which is all about embracing the biology of our nervous system to foster self-compassion. And there's a number of trauma-informed meditations. Thank you so much, Lisa, for you are such an amazing human. And I'm so grateful for your light in the world and the work that you do. And you're just this beautiful, powerful presence. And it's just been such an honor to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Sabi. So good to be with you. Thanks so much for listening. My hope is that you walk away from these episodes feeling supported and like you have a place to come to find the hope and inspiration you need to take your next small step forward. For more information and resources, please visit howwecanheal.com. There, you'll find tons of helpful resources and the full transcript of each show. Thanks so much for your messages, feedback, and ideas about the podcast. I love hearing from you, and I so appreciate your support. There are lots of ways you can support the show, and I'm grateful for every little bit of love you share. If you love the show, please leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube to get updates every week. You can always visit howwecanheal.com/podcast to share your thoughts and ideas. I love hearing from you, so keep your comments coming. If you'd like to stay connected in between episodes, you can also text me. Text the word HEAL to 888-858-0811. That's 888-858-0811. I went for the number with a lot of eights in it. I'll send you some inspiration and support a few times a month, and you can text me back there too. Before we wrap up, I want to be clear that this podcast isn't offering any prescriptions. It's not advice or any kind of diagnosis. Your decisions are in your hands, and we encourage you to consult with any relevant healthcare professionals you may need to support you through your unique path of healing. I'd also like to send thanks to our guests today, to Christine O'Donnell and Celine Baumgartner of Bright-Sided Podcasting, and to everyone who helped support this podcast directly and indirectly. Alex, thanks for taking the dogs out while I record. Lastly, I'd love to give a shout out to my big brother, Matt, who passed away in 2002. He wrote this music, and it makes my heart so happy to share it with you now.